Welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Oh, what a wicked web we weave when first we practice to deceive, said Sir Walter Scott about the global derivative market's natch. Or at least he could have. The deception at the heart of the derivatives market is, of course, that risk can be separated from reward, and once removed, this risk can be disappeared, like so many bearded men and little children in the war on terror. Poof, gone, zap, disappeardo. Poof, zap, gone, disappeardo. But the first law of thermo-derivatives says that risk can only be managed, never destroyed. And so because of this practice to deceive, we have a wicked web of LIBOR rigging, price fixing, gold suppressing, central bankers atop a pyramid of algo grifting, client account stealing, risk shifting, banking scoundrels who have caused the global financial meltdown. Stacy.
Max Keiser, yes. We are all trapped in this wicked web, and you can see that in places like Ireland, where we're stuck in this web of deceit that they've created of all these derivatives and fraudulent debts that nobody can move without getting stuck further into this web of deception. But when these deceivers get caught, one of the things in a classic con is to try to blame the victim. So let's look at some of these headlines regarding these deceivers and now that they've been caught. S&P lawsuit portrays CDO sellers as duped victims. Oh, the poor suckers at Citigroup and Bank of America, fooled about the stench of their own garbage by those sneaky credit raters at Standards & Poor's. So the U.S. Department of Justice, as we know, has filed a civil suit against Standard & Poor's, the rating agency, saying that they fraudulently rated these collateralized debt obligations of the subprime mortgage packages. And the U.S. Justice Department made some peculiar allegations in its lawsuit this week against S&P and its parent McGraw-Hill. According to the government, Citigroup was defrauded by S&P credit ratings on subprime mortgage bonds that Citigroup itself created and sold. Bank of America, too, allegedly was defrauded by S&P in the same way.
If you look at any mafia movie, the witnesses get whacked. So the rating agencies were paid to give bogus ratings. This was a story 6 months ago. Moody's, S&P, Fitch all took money under the table in bribes to give faulty or dishonest ratings. They rated toxic securities that weren't the paper they weren't printed on AAA rating. They were worthless. They are a witness to the fraud. So now Citibank is going to try to whack them. Moody's, which is has a big position in Moody's by Warren Buffett. So he may have to let one of his captains, Moody's, get whacked because they're a witness to the crime. So as it gets more difficult to repeat the same con, money is tight even in the professional circles of larceny, that is Wall Street. So now they're more about the whacking business.
However, in this case, S&P decided not to settle with the Department of Justice. They actually want to go to trial because they reckon that this is so absurd, is beyond absurd, that even the normal person out there is going to see how absurd this is. It's so hard to hide the absurdity.
Well, S&P is going to end up in the witness protection program for rating agencies because they're going to get whacked. I'll make that prediction right now. I mean, one of those guys will be disappeared, as we alluded to in the introduction. People are being disappeared into, like Jimmy Hoffa. I mean, whoever runs S&P now is going to go the way of Jimmy Hoffa. He's just going to be in a cement shoe somewhere at the bottom of the river. People say, whatever happened to that guy? I don't know. I guess he's on a vacation.
Well, the DOJ, the Department of Justice, is suing the S&P under a 1989 statute that covers frauds against federally insured financial institutions. So there are about 24 collateralized debt obligations issued in 2007 in particular that they're suing them for. Under the government's theory, Citigroup and Bank of America paid S&P for ratings that convinced the banks their own CDO awful was rock solid. And because S&P deceived them into thinking the best of their own rubbish, these banks and other lenders suffered more than $5 billion of investment losses, according to the suit.
Well, the banks didn't lose a penny. They applied for bailouts and got bailed out. The taxpayer, through austerity or inflation is suffering. And I think that in the case of these rating agencies who were packaging fraudulent securities, I mean, look what's happening in Greece, for example. The rating agencies plus Citibank, plus Goldman Sachs, plus Lloyd Blankfein, remember they were in Greece. They gave AAA rating to toxic securities that they knew would blow up, knew that the country would blow up. Then they're in there with privatization schemes. They're taking over assets for pennies on the dollar as part of a leveraged buyout of a country called Greece. And so now, as I said, the witnesses are coming forward and they're saying, wait a minute, now that people are on the streets with torches and pitchforks and they're looking for their pound of flesh, we want to point the finger at Citibank. And Citibank is saying, wait a minute, we need the government now, the Department of Justice under Holder, who's he's a hitman. He's going to whack them one way or another.
Of course, Bank of America and Citigroup have a long history that one could see that they are very innocent. These two banks in particular would have no understanding of the fraud they themselves were perpetrating.
Well, look how they screwed up Argentina.
Yeah.
You know, back in the 80s and 90s, they had the government nationalize Citibank's private debts. And then they forced the people to suffer through austerity. And so Citibank is a serial financial hijinxer. You know, I'm going to avoid the T word for today, just for variety. I mean, if I thought the T word was being prosecuted in this country or America, I would mention it. If I thought that a drone sent up the schwing of Jenkins over at Barclays Bank and exploded in his intestines and splattered him on the wall, if I thought that would have any effect, if I thought the government would give a flying hoot about their own population, I would mention the T word. But I don't, because they don't.
Well, let's talk about the UK because, of course, this week we've also seen RBS fined $615 million. Most of that is going to the CFTC and the U.S. Department of Justice and a little bit to the FSA here. But here's the headline regarding this, Max. Matyness to blame for LIBOR fixing.
I've never seen this, but I'm pretty sure I know what you're going to say. That they're mates on the phone, and they're just swapping gossip, and they happen to slip into their gossip, oh, would you mind rigging the LIBOR? Is that what it's going to be? Is that what the story's going to be?
Close. So following this fine, Stephen Hester, the CEO of RBS, the taxpayer-owned RBS, was asked, is there a risk of a cartel between investment banks to deliberately fix the LIBOR rate? Hester reckons that the problem is at more a junior level. There was a matyness, a city bars kind of thing, going back to the Big Bang. So he's saying, in the beginning, there was nothing. And then Maggie said, let there be fraud.
Yes, in the beginning, there was Stephen Hester. And on the 8th day, he committed massive fraud in the LIBOR scandal. And he's blaming his mates. He's blaming, oh, it's matyness. Well, I'd like to see him use that defense, you know, in a situation where the crimes are a bit more obvious. You know, people don't understand that when Stephen Hester commits fraud, F-R-A-U-D, in case you're wondering how to spell that word. Stephen Hester committed fraud, serial fraud committer. When you commit fraud, people don't understand that it has consequences. And so Stephen Hester's defense that, well, a bunch of my mates were arguing for gay rights down in, what's that town our director lives in, Brighton. Well, you know, we didn't take on board the fact that we were committing massive acts of financial fraud because we were touching each other, we were naked, we were in a hot tub, we're mates. And one of my mates in the hot tub naked, and I was touching his bum, and I said, hey, buddy, I'm Stephen Hester. Will you rig LIBOR for me? And he said, oh, Stephen, I love you. And they committed this massive fraud, but Stephen Hester saying, you know, we're mates. We want rights for fraudulent market riggers. And Cameron's saying, I've got the entire back benches behind me.
They're trying to blame this LIBOR rigging on a few bad apples, and that these few bad apples did it for personal gain, i.e. it was not an institutional crime. The institutions themselves were not involved in this. And they said they found no evidence that this went up to the senior levels of management.
That's a lie.
And they also found from the emails that the LIBOR rigging did not stop until November 2010 at RBS, 2 years after the taxpayer owned it. So the taxpayer itself is complicit in these crimes, by the way, that makes them. But he's saying that it's not an institutional systemic fraud, and it's not a conspiracy, and it's not a cartel. the classic ingredients of a RICO lawsuit. And yet, even on September 19th, 2008, you see an email going back and forth from inter-dealer broker B. He writes to Yen Trader 1, can you do me a favor? You're not going to get paid any bro for this, and we'll send you lunch around for the whole desk. Can you flat? Can you switch 2-year semi at 5 3/4, 100 yards, meaning 100 billion, between UBS? Just take it from UBS. Give it back to UBS. He wants to pay some bro. We won't bro you.
Right.
Yeah.
Notice the homoerotic language of the RBS traders. They're in the hot tub of fraud, and they're touching each other's bum, and they're saying, wait a minute, don't tell my wife. Don't tell my wife that I'm in the hot tub committing fraud massively. Stephen Hester's right here giving us all a nice olive oil rub down. Thank you, Stephen Hester. Okay, put it back in your pants and try to act like you're not a complete fraudulent hoaxster.
So another journalist asked why they are serving no time, why they're not being arrested. Because if you rigged a sports match, for example, you would do time. You would be arrested and thrown in jail. When 14-year-old boys join in on a nationwide riot and steal a bottle of water, remember David Cameron said, if you're old enough to do the crime, you're old enough to do the time.
Well, how come they can't take the defense that they were just mates? They're matey.
Exactly.
We're matey.
Well,
we torched the corner store and we stole a bottle of Lucasade and then we set the guy on fire. But we're innocent because we were being matey. I mean, why can't they use that defense? Oh, that's right. They're not white.
Yes. Now, RBS not keen on blood on the market for the sake of it. This might be the takeaway quote from the RBS board. Sir Philip Hampton says that he hasn't seen the need for multiple casualties at or near the top of the bank for the sake of blood on the carpet. This is what him explaining why they didn't need any arrests, or that they didn't need, other than these 21 bad apples that they identified, junior level bad apples.
Right, the bad apples and the HSBC junk money cartel bank scandal, the Barclays LIBOR rigging, the other two major banks involved in AIG, the mis-selling scandal, the credit default scandal. Every single one of these 4 major banks in the UK, the entire board of all these banks are complicit to fraud. F-R-A-U-D. You're complicit in fraud. Come over here and tell me you're not fraud, but you won't because you're busy in the hot tub touching each other's bum instead of coming down here and accounting for your fraud. That's unconscionable. You should be hung. Stacy, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
Stay tuned for the second half. I'll be speaking to Mitch Feierstein, author of Planet Ponzi. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to Mitch Feierstein, author of Planet Ponzi, which I'm holding here right now. This is the book that explains, this is the Rosetta Stone of the entire global scam. Mitch, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
Thanks for having me here.
All right, Mitch Feierstein, you have some props, some lovely props. I like what I see. Tell me, what is all of this?
Well, Max, I think that what we need to do is explain to everyone the scope, scale, and magnitude of what $1 trillion or $3 trillion actually means. This is a U.S. $100 bill. This is my briefcase. If you take this briefcase, $1 million is a lot of money to me. You can fill it up with $100 bills and it would be $1 million.
Okay, I got it. So this is roughly the size of $1 million and $100 bills.
Correct. Now, the Fed's balance sheet, which is over $3 trillion, that would be in $100 bills. If you were to stack them up, it would be 10,000 times taller than, or actually 11,000 times taller than the Empire State Building. Mm-hmm. That's pretty high, 3.7 million meters tall.
Okay.
So it's vast. 1.4 trillion is the entire amount of the monetary gold in the world.
Now before the crisis started, they had roughly 800 billion on their balance sheet. Now it's over 3 trillion.
That's right.
And during the crisis, as part of the dealing with the crisis, they swapped toxic assets with the banking community for fresh treasury bills, and they keep those toxic assets on their books with the idea that at some point, you're going to fake it till you make it. At some point, growth will happen, and then they can unwind that balance sheet. But growth's not happening.
The problem is there's a blame game going on. The favorite game is three different elements of it: divert and deflect, delay and pray, and extend and pretend. That's the bag of tricks that they have. Unfortunately, you reach a brick wall at some point, and the effectiveness of QE starts diminishing each time you do it.
Right, because going back to, even go back 20, 30 years, the idea was you can float debt, the debt creates growth, and the growth, as long as the GDP is rising faster than the rate or percentage that your debt is growing, net, you have a growing economy. But starting a year ago or so, no matter how much they inject into the economy, there doesn't seem to be any growth. So instead of changing course, instead of saying, maybe this strategy needs to be reworked, maybe we take another direction, they're doubling down. They seem to be, the very definition of insanity. They're just doing more and more of it. And as a result, this is leading to real inflation that we really see in stuff. I see you've got some silver. This is the Keiser Ethical Silver Round. I see you have a gold Krugerrand, which I'll hold on to and just for safekeeping.
Safety. I explained that a year ago. That gold is safety. It's a safety
It's
trade.
safe now. It's never been safer. So why did you bring these today?
Well, I think that what's going on is asset bubbles are being inflated by the central banks around the world by Japan starting a currency war. I don't know how many people realize that. But when you inflate asset bubbles to create phantom collateral to support debt-based aggregate demand, which is what the central banks are screaming about, Keynesian theory, let's create aggregate demand. What's going to happen is it's debt-based aggregate demand that they're creating with phantom collateral. That's going to evaporate and implode when the stock markets ultimately collapse because they're not based upon reality.
Okay,
they're based upon printing, and then the debt is going to remain. And what's going to happen, pensions are evaporating. The pensions, people are screaming in England because of what's happened with the pensions. And it's a good thing that the MPC has 9 members who can vote against more monetary stimulus and against more unlimited money printing. Bringing somebody in to print money is a dangerous game.
All right, so 2 points there. You mentioned pension holders in the UK are suffering. And the Bank of England put out a study. They said for every £1 that is being saved on mortgages, let's say, with lower interest rates, they're losing £2 in savings and pension accounts and in the insurance industry. So there again, you have the arithmetic of losing. Now, you also mentioned this idea of collateral value. So we know that in the global system of banking, it works on fractional reserve, where banks hold maybe 10% of the loans that they make. But over the past 10 years, Mitch, correct me if I'm wrong, the assimilation of these trillions and trillions of dollars of bad debt means that they're not really holding 10%, they're not really holding 1%. In the case of the Federal Reserve Bank, they're what's the store money, the core money, the base money is relative to the debts, they're less than 2% now, correct?
Leverage in Europe has not changed. Leverage is getting bigger in the US. Too big to fail has gotten bigger. Now, there's a couple things we want to talk about here. Numbers never lie. But people, bankers, and politicians do. So you can manipulate numbers to say anything, and inflation is a good example of that. Oil prices, for example, I brought another prop along.
Oh.
If we take a look at this, oil prices since 2011, as you can see, are up 36%. Yet the official inflation numbers, as the government would like you to believe, they claim are benign, and Ben Bernanke says they're controlled. Similar to when he said in 2008 or 9 that subprime housing crisis was contained. What you also don't see in many places when people talk about buying equities and equities are undervalued. If equities were really and truly undervalued, you'd see a lot more merger and acquisition activity, which you're not really seeing. But gold in the past 10 years, as you can see from this chart, is up over 500%. And the equities returns have been flat or minimal.
Well, this all sounds all very fascinating, and we know the risks. We've covered the risks. And people say, well, when's it going to explode? I think we already are seeing it exploding in something called the currency wars.
Japan is one of the crucial players in this. Their currency against the euro and against the US dollar and the pound, if you look at it, there's been a gigantic move in the past 6 months. I think 26% the euro has moved against the yen. That's currency devaluation, currency debasement. It's a devaluation. And 16% against sterling and 16% against the US dollar. Now the euro, this is a 100 euro note. If you notice, I can't even tell. It looks like play money. They've got a bunch of arcs on here and some bridges. Do you know where the bridge goes or where this bridge is?
That would be the Pont Neuf in Paris, connect over the Seine. This is where I first met Stacy Herbert.
Well, no, it's actually the bridge to nowhere because they couldn't agree upon what country's bridges to put on here, so they made it up. It's imaginary. Like the value of this currency is appreciating on nothing. just on air. So it tells you what a bad state the economies must be in. You know, Spain is ready to implode. You can't believe anything that the leaders of Spain said. You know, there's a corruption charge going on there, and quite frankly, they've had negative GDP, negative income from tax revenues, 26% unemployment, 60% youth unemployment, and people are buying those bonds. That's only the banks that have taken money from the LTRO are investing in those bonds. Those bonds are way overvalued in my view.
Okay, it gets back to the Planet Ponzi because this is a lottery ticket in Planet Ponzi.
Correct.
Basically. So it's a worthless piece of paper with worthless monuments that has a little hologram in one corner that is backed up by the value of the European Central Bank. But the European Central Bank itself is imploding in terms of its, let's say, base money to debt ratio is imploding. It's expanding alarmingly at an alarmingly fast rate. They're not growing. There's no savings. It's become a hologram.
Well, there's been no deleveraging in Europe yet. None of the banks have delevered, and that's a massive problem because you don't know what kind of toxic assets are on the books of the banks. I mean, look at MPS and the MPS scandal. All the emails disappeared. Are you shocked? I mean, Mario Draghi was the head of the Bank of Italy at the time, and all these emails have disappeared. There's an investigation going on.
Right, mortgage-backed securities. So they went down the memory hole.
Right, that's exactly right. But, you know, that's Monty DePasci.
Okay, we've got a minute or so left, and I just wanted to talk about key strategy here, the exit strategy, the unwinding strategy, because, okay, you got all these banks, they got all this incredible trillions of dollars of bad debt. They say, Bernanke said, well, we can start unwinding in 15 minutes, no problem. That's what they say. But, of course, once they do start to unwind and there's an actual bid for these things that they're trying to get rid of, then the rest of the market knows that it's not going to be supported by the central banks anymore, and they're going to sell. So they're going to be selling against everyone else selling at the same time. So you're going to have a huge crash. And they therefore, a lot of people are saying that there is no exit strategy, that this will never end. What we're heading for, Mitch, curious what you think about this, would be a global reset, like we had at Bretton Woods after World War II.
That won't work. I think that you'll have to have sovereign failures. And what's happening?
And Japan, you're thinking, could be the
first one.
And that would be hyperinflation.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be hyperinflation, but you're going to have, if you debase the currency by 30%, that's exactly what you're going to get. There is no exit strategy. There are no buyers for the massive amounts of these bills.
So the global Ponzi scheme, the music stops, and somebody doesn't have a chair, and that somebody you're thinking is Japan.
Well, the first one might be Japan, but the United States has to get its way out of debt. They can't kick it down the road any further, which is what they're doing. That's a strategy that doesn't work. Hope is never a trading strategy, okay?
Yeah.
That doesn't work. I mean, you know how
you can remain hopeful longer than markets remain irrational.
That's exactly right. You know, the LIBOR scandal was a tip of the iceberg, as you know. There's a lot more out there, but lack of enforcement, as usual, is the problem. They have the tools to do it. They've chosen not to do it. Look at MF Global. What happened to that? I mean, 1.2 billion,
but Mitch,
and John Corzine disappeared off into the sunset.
He got whacked?
No, I don't think so.
Not yet?
Not yet.
So what do you think about this idea that the banks are now saying that they're victims, that they were involved in these toxic CDOs because the rating agencies gave them high ratings?
That's kind of a ridiculous argument, but you know, I think that argument, S&P, they're going after S&P, and if one was guilty, they're all guilty. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that the banks could have been unwound like that savings and loans in America. And
right. The Resolution Trust Corporation, that was the depository for all the bad stuff during the savings and loan crisis in America. That is what now people call a bad bank, correct?
Correct. Well,
that's what they call it now. The bad bank.
It is a bad bank.
Right. So they took all the junk, they put it into a bad bank. They essentially protected the deposits. They got new management, and they brought about competition. Got rid of the bad guys, brought about competition. Then they tried to work out of the bad debt over 20, 30 years. As the market hopefully improves, you kind of leach it out, and you can get rid of it over time. But the idea of creating a bad bank now in a $600 trillion global derivatives market, and it is like you need a bad planet.
I think
you need a Ponzi planet needs a bad
Planet Ponzi, but I think that your 600 trillion in derivatives is an understatement. If you look at the controller of the currency's website, it's exponential, the amount that they're admitting to on balance sheet. So you know that it's probably much larger. It's a much larger number. As always, when they report losses like the whale went from 2 to 6 to whatever.
Right.
It's bigger than 600 trillion, I'm telling you.
We need a bad planet.
That's exactly right.
to store, like sequester the bad
Planet
debt.
Ponzi is the way out.
Planet X. Wait, it's the way out?
Yeah,
We're
it is
going to
the way out.
monetize Planet Ponzi? This is going to be the new collateral holding the
Planet
world's global
Ponzi.
central bank? It could. You could float a 1 trillion new credit default swaps, but just using this as collateral.
Because all the CDOs, CLOs, and all of these products have come back, and leverage has gotten bigger. There were no lessons learned by Too Big to Fail. The regulators have lost even more teeth. There is no guard dog. The guard dog has no teeth, but a reasonable bark on television.
That's all the time we have. It goes by so fast. We'll have to have you on again soon, but thanks for being on the Keiser Report.
Max, I appreciate it. It was great. Thanks for having me.
All right. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank my guest, Mitch Feierstein, author of this classic, instant classic, Planet Ponzi. If you'd like to contact us, please tweet us at Keiser Report or at facebook.com/Keiser Report. Until next time, Max Keiser saying, bye, y'all.